The 1980s and 90s were the golden age of trucking. Highways were packed with iconic rigs that represented power, freedom, and the open road. These weren't just transportation, they were statements. But drive down any highway today, and you'll notice something strange. Many of the trucks that absolutely dominated those decades have completely disappeared. We're talking about 10 legendary 18-wheelers that you couldn't miss in the 80s and 90s, trucks that defined what it meant to be a professional driver. These machines shaped an entire generation's understanding of what a real truck should be, and yet they've vanished from our roads like they never existed. So let's fire up those Detroit diesels and take a ride back to when these titans ruled the American highway. Number 10. International S Series. Starting at number 10, we have the International S Series, a truck that was absolutely everywhere in the 80s and early 90s. If you lived through that era, you saw these trucks hauling everything from produce to steel. The S Series represented International Harvester's conventional truck lineup during this period, and they built these machines tough. The S stood for sedan, referring to the cab style, and these trucks came in various configurations from the basic S1600 all the way up to the heavy-duty S2600. What made the S Series so popular was its no-nonsense approach to trucking. These weren't flashy show trucks, they were working-class heroes built for daily grinding. The cab was functional and reasonably comfortable, with straightforward controls and decent visibility. International understood that drivers needed reliability more than luxury. Under the hood, you could spec these trucks with International's own diesel engines, or choose from Cummins, Detroit Diesel, and Caterpillar options. Fleet operators loved this flexibility because they could standardize on their preferred engine across their entire fleet. The S Series chassis was robust and could handle serious payloads day after day. The styling was distinctly 80s, squared off, no nonsense, and purposeful. That tall rectangular grille and flat hood gave the S Series an honest, hard-working appearance. You knew this was a truck built to make money, not win beauty contests. International went through massive corporate changes in the mid-80s, including bankruptcy and restructuring. The S Series was eventually phased out as International redesigned their entire lineup. By the mid-90s, the S Series had disappeared, replaced by newer models. Today, finding one still working is rare, and seeing one on the highway is nearly impossible. The S Series became a casualty of corporate turmoil and changing market demands, but for a solid decade, these trucks were the backbone of American freight. Number 9. Efforta LTL 9000. Number 9 takes us to Ford's heavyweight contender, the LTL 9000. When people think of Ford trucks, they usually picture F-150s and Super Duties. But in the 80s and 90s, Ford was a serious player in the heavy-duty market. The Louisville Truckline 9000 was Ford's flagship semi, and it was everywhere. That distinctive tall hood with the Ford oval proudly displayed meant business. The LTL 9000 had a commanding presence on the highway. It looked tough, capable, and distinctly American. Ford brought something unique to the heavy truck market, their massive dealer network. While other truck manufacturers had limited service locations, Ford had dealers in virtually every town across America. For owner-operators and fleet managers, this was huge. Break down in the middle of nowhere, and chances are there was a Ford dealer within reasonable towing distance. The cab of the LTL 9000 was comfortable by 80s standards, incorporating some of Ford's passenger car expertise. Sound insulation was better than many competitors, and the ride quality was solid. Ford offered various sleeper configurations, and drivers appreciated the thoughtful interior layout. The HVAC system actually worked well, which wasn't always a given in that era. Engine options included Ford's own power plants, along with Cummins and Caterpillar diesels. The trucks were built in Ford's Louisville, Kentucky plant, which gave them their LTL designation. These were proper commercial vehicles engineered for hundreds of thousands of miles of hard use. But Ford made a strategic decision in 1996 to exit the heavy truck market in North America. They sold their heavy truck operations to Freightliner, and just like that, the LTL 9000 was history. By the late 90s, they'd essentially vanished from dealer lots, and as the trucks aged out of service, they disappeared from the highways. Ford's departure left a hole in the market and took with it a distinctive piece of trucking history that defined the era. Number 8. White GMC. Volvo White. At number 8, we have one of the most confusing chapters in trucking history, the White GMC and later Volvo White trucks. Stay with me, because this corporate soap opera produced some seriously good trucks that completely dominated their era. In the 80s, White Motor Company owned or partnered with GMC's heavy truck division, creating the White GMC brand. These trucks wore badges that said both White and GMC, combining the heritage of two legendary manufacturers. The Autocar, a distinctive conventional truck, and various cabover models fell under this umbrella. Then, in 1981, Volvo purchased White, creating Volvo White, and things got even more interesting. You had trucks with European-influenced design combined with American components and engineering. The result was some genuinely excellent machines that blended the best of both worlds. These trucks were everywhere in the 80s. The conventional models had clean, modern styling that looked fresh compared to some competitors. The cabovers were particularly popular, offering excellent visibility and maneuverability. Volvo's engineering influence showed in details like cab ergonomics and build quality. The white Volvo White trucks were known for being driver-friendly. The cabs were well thought out with logical control placement and good sightlines. They offered competitive power options and could be configured for virtually any application. Fleet operators appreciated their reliability and relatively low operating costs. So what happened? Volvo eventually decided to fully rebrand everything under the Volvo name in North America. By the mid-90s, the white badges disappeared entirely and everything became Volvo. While this made sense from a branding perspective, it erased decades of American trucking heritage. The white GMC and Volvo White trucks that had been so common throughout the 80s and early 90s simply ceased to exist as a brand. Today you'd be hard-pressed to find one still working, and most people under 40 have no idea these trucks ever existed. Number 7. Marmon Conventional. Number 7 brings us to a true heavyweight, the Marmon Conventional trucks. Marmon might not be a household name today, but in the 80s and 90s, they built some of the toughest, most distinctive trucks on American roads. Marmon specialized in heavy haul and severe duty applications. These weren't your typical over-the-road freight trucks. Marmons were built for the hardest jobs imaginable. Think lowboy trailers hauling construction equipment, oversized loads that required permits, logging in extreme conditions. When the going got absolutely brutal, you called Marmon. The styling was unmistakable, aggressive, purposeful, and built like a tank. Long hoods housed massive engines because Marmon customers needed serious power. The frames were overbuilt, the suspensions were heavy-duty, and every component was selected for durability over cost savings. These trucks cost more than mainstream alternatives, but they lasted longer in conditions that would destroy lesser machines. Inside, the cabs were functional rather than luxurious, though later models offered decent comfort. But Marmon buyers weren't shopping for luxury. They needed trucks that could handle 150,000-pound loads and keep coming back for more. The visibility was excellent, which was crucial when maneuvering tight job sites with expensive equipment. Marmon had a cult following among heavy-haul operators and owner-operators who specialized in challenging work. The trucks commanded respect at truck stops and job sites. Driving a Marmon meant you were serious about trucking and probably hauling something impressive. The company faced financial difficulties in the 90s and eventually ceased truck production. The market for ultra-heavy-duty trucks was relatively small, and the specialized nature of Marmon's business made survival difficult during economic downturns. By the early 2000s, Marmon had stopped building trucks. Today, finding a Marmon on the road is like spotting a unicorn. They're out there, but they're incredibly rare. The trucks that defined heavy-haul operations in the 80s and 90s have largely vanished, replaced by custom-built rigs from manufacturers still in business. Number 6. Peterbilt 362. Coming in at number 6, we have the Peterbilt 362. And if you were driving in the 80s, you saw these everywhere. The 362 was Peterbilt's cabover offering, and it represented the peak of American cabover design. Peterbilt launched the 362 in 1981, and it quickly became the cabover of choice for drivers who refused to compromise on quality. This wasn't a budget truck, it was a premium machine that happened to have a flat front. Peterbilt applied their legendary attention to detail and build quality to the cabover format. The 362 had style for days. That distinctive Peterbilt front end with the signature oval grille looked fantastic on a cabover. The proportions were perfect, and the truck had presence despite the compact design. You could spot a 362 from a mile away, and it always looked sharp. But the 362 wasn't just about looks. The cab was surprisingly spacious and comfortable for a cabover. Peterbilt offered excellent sleeper configurations that made long-haul work viable. The build quality was exceptional. These trucks were hand-assembled with attention to detail you didn't find in mass-produced alternatives. Inside, the materials were top-notch and everything felt solid. Mechanically, you could spec a 362 with virtually any powertrain you wanted. Peterbilt's custom ordering system meant each 362 could be built exactly to the owner's specifications. The chassis was pure Peterbilt, overbuilt, durable, and designed to last hundreds of thousands of miles. The 362 stayed in production until 1987, when it was replaced by updated models. But the real death blow to the 362 came from regulatory changes. When the federal government increased allowable truck lengths, conventional trucks could run longer trailers, eliminating the main advantage of cabovers. The market shifted dramatically, and by the mid-90s, cabovers were becoming rare. Today, seeing a Peterbilt 362 is a special event. The trucks that once dominated the highways have become treasured collector's items, with well-preserved examples commanding serious money. Number 5. Kenworth T600. At number 5. We're highlighting a truck that was revolutionary in its time, the Kenworth T600. While some T600s are technically still around, the original 80s and early 90s versions that pioneered aerodynamics have essentially vanished. Kenworth introduced the T600 in 1984, and it changed everything. This was the first mass-produced aerodynamic semi in North America. That distinctive sloped hood and rounded cab weren't just styling exercises, they were science. Kenworth called it the vehicle of integrated technology, but everyone knew it as the anteater because of that long sloped nose. Drivers were skeptical at first. The T600 looked nothing like traditional Kenworths with their flat, squared-off styling. But then the fuel economy numbers came in, and skepticism turned to enthusiasm. The T600 could save thousands of dollars per year in fuel costs compared to conventional designs. In an era of fluctuating fuel prices, this was huge. The cab was also revolutionary. Kenworth designed the T600 with a spacious interior that prioritized driver comfort. The flat floor made moving around easier, and the aerodynamic design actually reduced wind noise, making the ride quieter. The visibility was excellent, and the ergonomics were thoughtfully done. Under that distinctive hood, you could get Caterpillar, Cummins, or Detroit diesel power. The T600 was a proper Kenworth, which meant quality construction and the ability to customize almost everything. Owner-operators who made the switch to a T600 often never looked back. The T600 spawned an entire generation of aerodynamic trucks and proved that you could have both style and efficiency. Kenworth kept evolving the design, eventually replacing it with the T660 and then the T680. Those early T600s from the 80s and early 90s, the ones that pioneered the aerodynamic revolution, have largely disappeared from active service. They were worked hard, accumulated massive mileage, and eventually retired. Today, they're nostalgic reminders of when American truck design changed forever. Number 4. Freightliner FLC120. Number 4 brings us to a Freightliner that was absolutely everywhere in the 80s and 90s, the FLC120. This conventional truck represented Freightliner at their peak of smart, efficient design. The FLC designation stood for Freightliner Conventional, and the 120 referred to the bumper-to-back-of-cab measurement. But numbers don't tell the story of why these trucks dominated their era. The FLC 120 hit a sweet spot of style, efficiency, and value that resonated with both fleet operators and owner-operators. The styling was clean and modern without being radical. Freightliner gave the FLC120 a long, elegant hood and well-proportioned cab that looked professional and contemporary. It wasn't trying to be retro or futuristic, it was confidently current. The aerodynamics were good for the era, helping fuel economy without compromising on that classic long hood look drivers wanted. Inside, the FLC120 was all business in the best way. The cab was comfortable and functional with logical control placement and good visibility. Freightliner offered excellent sleeper options, and the build quality was solid. These trucks felt substantial without being overbuilt, striking a balance that made financial sense. What really sold fleets on the FLC120 was reliability and service costs. These trucks were engineered for easy maintenance. Mechanics could access components readily, and parts were widely available. Freightliner's dealer network was extensive, meaning downtime could be minimized. The trucks just worked, day after day, racking up miles without drama. You could spec an FLC120 with various engines and drivetrains, but most came with tried-and-true combinations that prioritized reliability over bleeding-edge technology. Owner-operators appreciated that the FLC120 made good business sense. It was affordable to buy, cheap to operate, and held its value reasonably well. Freightliner eventually moved on to newer model lines, and by the late 90s, the FLC120 was being phased out. Today, they've essentially disappeared from the highways. The trucks that were so common they were almost invisible have actually become invisible through retirement. That's the fate of successful working trucks. They get used until they're used up. Number 3. International 9000. Coming in at number 3, we have the International 9000, and this one was massive in the 90s. International called it their Eagle Series, and it represented International's serious push into the premium long-haul market. The 9000 debuted in 1989, and it immediately grabbed attention. International designed this truck to compete directly with premium offerings from Peterbilt, Kenworth, and Freightliner. The styling was contemporary and attractive, with a distinctive front end that featured International's signature bold grille and swept-back hood. What made the 9300 special was that International brought their legendary durability to the premium market. These weren't basic fleet trucks. They were intended for owner-operators and small fleets who wanted something special. The attention to detail showed everywhere you looked. The cab was spacious and comfortable, with significantly better sound insulation than earlier International models. The ride quality was excellent, and International offered luxurious sleeper configurations that rivaled anyone in the industry. The 9300 was designed to be a driver's truck, and it succeeded. The ergonomics were well thought out, with controls falling naturally to hand. International offered the 9300 with various engines, including their own power plants and alternatives from Cummins, Detroit Diesel, and Caterpillar. The chassis was robust, and the build quality was solid. These trucks were engineered for the long haul, both literally and figuratively. The 9300 was popular through much of the 90s, and you saw them everywhere on major highways. Owner-operators liked the combination of International's reputation for durability with the premium features usually reserved for more expensive brands. Fleet operators appreciated the value proposition, but International was going through corporate changes, and by the early 2000s, the 9300 was replaced by newer models. The 9000 series eventually gave way to International's current truck lines. Today, finding a 9300 still in daily service is rare. The trucks that defined International's 90s success story have largely retired, replaced by newer equipment. The Eagle has landed, and it's mostly in salvage yards and the occasional collector's garage. Number 2. Mack CH Series. At number 2, we're celebrating a Mack that absolutely owned the 90s, the CH Series. This was Mack's answer to the aerodynamic revolution, and it proved that Mack could evolve without losing their soul. Mack introduced the CH in 1988, and it represented a significant departure from their previous conventional designs. The CH featured a more aerodynamic hood and cab while maintaining Mack's signature tough truck character. That bulldog on the hood still meant business, but the business now involved better fuel economy and reduced wind noise. The styling worked beautifully. Mack managed to make the CH look modern and efficient, without sacrificing the visual toughness that Mack trucks were known for. The proportions were excellent, and the truck had real presence on the highway. You could immediately identify it as a Mack, which is harder to do than it sounds when you're making aerodynamic changes. Inside, the CH represented a major step forward for Mack. The cab was comfortable and spacious, with good ergonomics and quality materials. Mack offered excellent sleeper configurations, and the overall interior quality reflected Mack's premium positioning. The ride was classic Mack, firm but confidence-inspiring. These trucks felt planted and stable even in challenging conditions. Mechanically, the CH was pure Mack. Most came with Mack's own E7 or E-Tech engines, paired with Mack transmissions and rear ends. This integrated approach meant everything was designed to work together. Mack loyalists loved this. You were driving a complete Mack system, not just a chassis with someone else's components. The CH was incredibly successful through the 90s and into the 2000s. Mack eventually introduced the Granite and Pinnacle series, and the CH was phased out. Those 90s-era CHs that dominated highways for over a decade are now largely gone. They were worked hard in all kinds of applications, and after years of faithful service, they've been retired. The CH series proved Mack could compete in the modern era, but like all trucks, time and miles eventually took their toll. Today, seeing an original 90s CH is uncommon, a reminder of when Mack successfully navigated the transition to modern truck design. Number 1. Kenworth T800. And at number 1, we have a truck that might surprise you, because technically the T800 is still in production. But the original 80s and 90s versions that dominated those decades are essentially extinct. The Kenworth T800 deserves the top spot because it was the truck of that era. Kenworth introduced the T800 in 1986, positioning it as their workhorse conventional. While the T600 was revolutionary and the W900 was the king of style, the T800 was the truck that got the job done day after day. It became one of the best-selling trucks of the late 80s and through the 90s. The T800 had a distinctive look, a setback front axle, a shorter hood than the W900, and a more upright cab position. This configuration gave excellent visibility and made the T800 incredibly maneuverable for a truck its size. The styling was clean and purposeful, unmistakably Kenworth but focused on function over flash. What made the T800 dominate was its versatility. You saw these trucks doing everything: dump trucks in construction, mixers on concrete jobs, heavy haul applications, over-the-road freight, logging in the Pacific Northwest. The T800 could be configured for virtually any application, and it excelled at all of them. This wasn't a specialized truck, it was a universal platform that could handle anything. The cab was comfortable and well-built, classic Kenworth quality throughout. The truck rode well, handled confidently, and stood up to abuse. Kenworth offered endless customization options, so no two T800s were exactly alike. Owner-operators could build their dream truck, while fleets could standardize on configurations that met their specific needs. Mechanically, you could spec a T800 with any major diesel engine manufacturer. The chassis was robust. The suspension could be configured from highway smooth to severe duty tough. These trucks lasted. Properly maintained T800s from the 80s and 90s could accumulate over 1 million miles. So why is the T800 number 1 if it's still in production? Because the T800s that dominated those decades are gone. Kenworth has continuously updated the model over the years. The current T800 shares the name, but is a fundamentally different truck with modern emission systems, updated styling, and contemporary technology. Those original boxy mechanical T800s that you saw everywhere from 1986 through the late 90s have vanished. They were worked until they couldn't work anymore, then retired. Today's highways are filled with modern trucks, but those legendary T800s that defined an era exist mostly in memories and the occasional truck show. So there you have it. 10 18-wheelers that absolutely dominated the 1980s and 90s, but have vanished from today's highways. From the International S Series to the legendary Kenworth T800, these trucks defined what professional trucking meant for an entire generation. The disappearance of these trucks tells us something about the nature of the industry. Trucking is relentlessly practical. These machines were worked hard, accumulating hundreds of thousands or even millions of miles. They transported the goods that built modern America, but eventually, Time and miles took their toll. Stricter emissions regulations, improving technology, and simple economics meant these trucks were gradually retired and replaced. But for those who drove them, who maintained them, who built their businesses around them, these trucks represent more than just transportation equipment. They're memories of long nights on the road, of making a living behind the wheel, of an era when trucks had distinct personalities and driving was as much art as profession. The trucks may have vanished, but their legacy continues. Many of today's trucks evolved directly from the innovations and lessons learned from these 80s and 90s legends. And somewhere out there, a few survivors still roll down the highway, maintained by enthusiasts who refuse to let these machines fade completely into history. What about you? Did you drive any of these trucks? Do you remember seeing them everywhere? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experiences with these vanished legends of the highway. Thanks for watching, and keep on trucking. We'll see you in the next one.